All right, everyone. The Democrats are deciding to go after the Second Amendment in even more brazen a manner. This isn't even just about guns. This is about one of the core tenets of the Second Amendment itself, in its own explicit language, by the way. It's interesting because the Democrats usually tell me that the militia means the U.S. military, yet they're using that particular term in their bill. Paramilitary militia activity. It's the Stopping Paramilitary Activities Act. This is by Jamie Raskin and Ed Markey, both far-left Democrats, Raskin in the House, Markey, of course, in the Senate. And they've co-sponsored this bill. So it's a joint bill because Senate and House. And what it would do is it would effectively prohibit people from doing any form of militia-style training in a public space. Now, it's not clear that this would ban somebody from having private property to do that. But as we've seen, there's a workaround. Cue Slate Ridge here in the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont sued the owner. I can't recall his name. Bunyan, I think it was. And they sued him over his paramilitary camp there. But they didn't sue him for noise complaint because guns. They didn't sue him for allegedly a few incidents involving harassment and intimidation. It appears probably a two-edged sword on that one. By the way, he's fled the state in order to avoid the charges against him. Nope, they sued him in environmental court. They said that the structures that he had built there out in the woods for training purposes weren't permitted, and so he had to take them down. And so Slate Ridge is no more, which is ridiculous. They decided to bypass the Second Amendment by going through the environmental courts just to harass this individual. And that's exactly what they did. Now, this particular act is unconstitutional. In the most blatant sense. And by the way, it will not pass. There's no chance of it passing. You're not going to get enough neocons on board with a bill like this. The problem is that the Second Amendment explicitly protects the militia, which they are referring to explicitly within this bill. And it may not be impeded. To prevent the militia from being capable of training for any organized purpose would effectively nullify the very concept of a militia. The militia is the body of people at large, whether they're mustered or unmustered, organized or disorganized at the time, who have achieved the age of majority, they're not incarcerated or a lunatic, and they're physically and mentally capable of wielding arms. That's not just firearms, although that tends to be the topic of the day. It involves bladed weapons. It involves explosives, which are legal, by the way, with a tax stamp and with the proper training and so forth. Personally, I don't think there should be a tax stamp involved, but whatever. And that's the militia. The militia has to be capable of being organized, otherwise it's not well regulated. That is, well capable of functioning. That's the parlance of the late 1700s. It can't be well regulated unless it can train. For instance, if a person does not know how to use their firearm in a safe manner, if they don't know how to hit the broadside of a barn, they're not well regulated. They need to train with their weapon. Maybe somebody else trains them. Maybe they just watch goddamn Hickok on YouTube or something like that and figure it out for themselves. I know how to operate a variety of firearms. Rifle, revolver, handgun, etc. A bow. Oh, I'm not a huge fan of bows. I don't know. Firearms exist. Kind of defeats the purpose now, doesn't it? I know. It's romantic to go out and kill a deer with your bow, I suppose. Alright, I'm not much for hunting anyway. Mainly my guns are, hey, a bear lumbered out of the forest and is trying to attack cats. Hey, a rabid dog is prowling across the property, drooling and falling over itself. Somebody should put it down because it's suffering. Oh, something's trying to eat my fucking leeks. Big mistake, especially when I get the varmint rifle. That's what it's, or home invasion or something like that. You do everyday carry in case, you're in a mass shooting incident or something like that and you have no choice but to try to defend yourself. You may very well not be the good guy with a gun and get shot anyway, but at least you tried. I would rather be able to make the attempt. This is an explicit attack on the core premise of the Second Amendment, even beyond the concept of gun control. With gun control, typically you're talking about certain classes of weapons should be banned or regulated or something. I disagree with that premise entirely, but you're not effectively disarming people. They're still buying guns, they're still buying armor, etc., etc. You're just trying to further restrict the ability of the militia to operate. This would effectively neuter the militia, as in it wouldn't be clear that 2 or more people could ever gather to go shooting or anything like that. By the way, how do you define paramilitary activity anyway in the strictest sense? The courts would be bogged down for decades trying to figure that out. Well, these guys were getting together in their gear and shooting at targets and stuff, and one of them happened to say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if these targets was politicians? Well, obviously they're training to kill politicians. They're not allowed to do that. They violated the act. Felony charges. Then a court has to litigate. Does the offhand comment about politician targets, would that fall under the act? Would the act fall outside of the Constitution in that premise? Etc., etc. It's legalese. Yeah, these politicians fucking love it. They watch these court cases, man, they probably beat off to them. Anyway, it's self-evident. If you're going to have a militia, it has to operate in an organized manner. Paramilitary groups are listed in, again, this article is from Vice, so it's obviously in favor of this. Go down the article, and you'll see something astonishing. They actually invoke Ruby Ridge in this article. In support of the premise of stopping paramilitary activity. Do you know what happened at Ruby Ridge? A man's family was goddamn assassinated for absolutely no reason. What about Waco? That's mentioned too. Oh, you remember that time that the feds burned a bunch of women and children alive because they weren't patient enough to wait out the people in the Waco compound over automatic weapons fire reports that were never actually corroborated in the first place. Yeah, was the dude leading them a cult leader? Absolutely. He's probably a child molester too, but that doesn't mean that there were any automatic weapons on the property. Now, they did start firing at the feds when they showed up and refused them entry, but you burned a bunch of women and children alive. Most of the people who were injured or killed in the Waco invasion, they weren't CIA, they weren't FBI agents, they weren't cops, they were the people in the compound that got roasted by that tank. I like how they still deny that they're the ones that ignited the fire. Yeah, you can tell from the footage that the tank was spraying a little bit of something or other that got lit on fire in the compound. It was the feds burning them alive. The fact that those were even mentioned in the article astonished me. When I saw that, I was like, what? Thought I was having a stroke at first. I was like, this is Vice. Are they arguing for or against the act? Let's go back through it. No, they're arguing for it, but they're invoking Ruby Ridge. Yeah, the feds are very dangerous. Yeah, they kill U.S. citizens without probable cause. You remember that time? And there were a bunch of black militants in that holdup in that one apartment. I can't remember what city it was in. I think it was Chicago. And they dropped an explosive out of a helicopter and splattered the whole city block, killing a bunch of kids and shit. I can't remember the name of the incident, but I can remember the incident happened. This happens all the time. Feds have given people syphilis on purpose as part of medical experimentation. They injected people with radioactive substances to test the effects of that back in the day. They never got a consent from anyone. They used to, up until the 1970s, the state of Vermont was still sterilizing people of Native American descent. Did you know that? The woke, progressive, leftoid state of Vermont was the last one still doing it. 1974 was the final year. Anyway, getting off that topic about how evil the government is, the act itself violates the central explicit premise of the Second Amendment. Even if you were to argue, and you're wrong, well, the Second Amendment talks about arms. That means these arms. Okay, well, it's still okay. You've got a militia of people who have to do bare-knuckle boxing, I suppose. This would even violate that, because even for that organizational purpose, it would be illegal. The act itself is what is, of course, illegal under the Constitution. That's about all. Peace out.